What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Dr. Ronald Riggio. Dr. Ron, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I'm a professor, and I'm a psychologist, and but I teach more organizational psychology around leadership, and
Mm.
but I'm also kind of an expert in nonverbal communication. That's how I started out, um, and in interpersonal skills, social skills. So actually, how I got to leadership is I was studying relationship skills. And then I realized leadership was a very complex relationship, right? That we have relationship with our national leaders, with our bosses. And so that led me into that. Kind of on a personal level, I've got two daughters from two different mothers.
Mm.
So I've been through that. And then I have two stepkids. So
Okay.
so I have some experience in that world. And I'm in California, and I've taught in all the California systems, University of California, Cal State. I'm now at a private liberal arts college, Claremont McKenna College, and I really like the liberal arts atmosphere, that broad learning.
Nice. Well, it's so you didn't say specifically, but it sounds like maybe you've been through a divorce yourself.
Couple.
All right. So I mean, it's everywhere. And I didn't know that prior. I mean, I'm not surprised, right? Because it does seem like it's everywhere. But and there's some of the things I think we may touch on too. We're definitely going to have some rabbit holes here because I'm experiencing some, I'll say, some leadership issues on my end. I'll say failings, maybe even. And that's perhaps an avenue that we could explore. But before we get to any of that type of stuff, one of the reasons the main reason I had you on is you wrote an article about social skills, about loneliness, and how the need for social skills. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. So as I like to do is define things. So let's first define what are social skills, and I think there's a few of them that we'll cover.
Okay. Yeah. So, think of this social skills, it's pretty complex, but it's basically people's ability to navigate and to, behave in social interactions. And that obviously relates to relationships. And let me kind of relate this to some things that are sort of more in the popular psychology press. So you might hear a lot about emotional intelligence and this idea that people can communicate non-verbally, they can communicate, emotionally. And that's, unlike verbal communication, nonverbal communication, we don't have words to describe it. But that's a big part of connecting with people. So we connect it with people at the emotional level. And so that's one area. The area that I think doesn't get enough attention, you might kind of call it social intelligence. So emotional intelligence is about the nonverbal side. Social intelligence is about the verbal side and kind of understanding what's going on in social interactions. So I actually divided into the two sides, although there's overlap.
Hmm.
But if you think about skills, social skills, there's sort of just three basic ones. There's ability to send messages, to communicate to other people, and at the emotional level, that's getting our feelings out.
Hmm.
At the verbal level or the social level, that's really saying the right thing at the right time or carrying on conversations, that kind of thing. So expressing ourselves. The other side of that is what I call sensitivity. So it's being sensitive to other people's emotional and nonverbal cues. So knowing that somebody's upset or getting angry or in a good mood. And again, that's the nonverbal side, but that sensitivity is being able to pick up on those emotions, those
Hmm.
emotional messages from other people. On the sort of verbal social side, that sensitivity is kind of reading other people, being able to listen well to what they're saying, extract the meaning. But in a social situation, it's also knowing about kind of how we navigate social situations, including relationships. What are sort of the unspoken rules, right? Psychologists call those norms, the unspoken rules. knowing what we call scripts, knowing how to behave in certain situations. And just simply, you attend a wedding, there's certain things that you do at a wedding. We know like what the script is,
Mm,
on a first date, we know there's a script. There's things that you don't, bring up. There's things that you might bring up, that kind of thing.
mm,
And then last is that ability to regulate all of this. So if we think of the emotional level, we need to regulate our emotions, not fly off the handle.
mm.
And at the social level, that regulation is kind of, I worked with a couple of people, and one of them coined the term savoir faire, or the term savoir faire, knowing how to be, being able to control yourself in a social setting so that you behave in a way that presents yourself well. So think about impression management.
Mm.
So there's a lot going on there, but basically think of it as expressing yourself, the sensitivity, listening to other people, and then regulating and controlling your own behavior. And so that encompasses general social skills.
There is going to be some very large rabbit holes that we are going to go down because of my own personal situation. Okay, so but I don't want to get off too far off track just yet. I'm gonna skip over this rabbit hole, but we're coming back to it.
We'll get there.
Oh yeah. So how do you develop these things? And they sound sort of, I don't want to say abstract, but in a way, right? Like, how do you? And I struggle with this again. This is the rabbit hole that's coming, I think. But I struggle with these types of things. How do you practice? How do you practice on reading someone's emotional intelligence type stuff, or reading someone's feelings? Like, how do you? I guess let me go back to the first questions. How do you develop these things first?
Yeah,
it seems sort of nebulous, kind of. You know what I mean?
yeah, it is. I mean, it is. But here's the thing. So think about this. Anything you want to develop, you want to become, you want to be buff, you want to be in good shape and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to take hard work, and you're going to have to work at it over time. So that's the first thing you should realize, that, that this, to really become an expert at, expert level of social skills, really, being able to impress people, to navigate all kinds of complex social situations, it takes time, right? Now, we've been developing this, over our lives, but the first thing is to sort of commit that this is going to take a lot of work. Okay. So let's look at sensitivity first. Okay. So if we're talking about the emotional side of the equation, right? We've got to be able to read people's expressions, and people are very good sometimes at managing their facial expressions. And, so we have to pay attention to those subtle cues. And so one of the things we do is just say, become a watcher,
Mm.
a people watcher. So spend some time, maybe in a park or something where people are interacting, and see if you can read their emotional expression. See if you can see what's going on. A long time ago, when I don't know if they're still popular, but soap operas. When we used to train students to pick up on nonverbal cues, we used to have them watch soap operas with the sound off, and then try to predict what was going on in the social situation. And if you think about it, people are overact on TV or
Sure.
overact in the soap operas. So it's actually a good way to sort of pick up on the cues. And then you can kind of turn the sound on and test yourself,
Mm.
And you can see this like in movies, are these two people going to get together romantically? Is there going to be a fight? So, working on those kinds of things, and then doing it in your everyday life. So one of the things to be a good watcher and listener is you got to put your own expression on hold.
Mm.
And so, we always kind of want to talk or whatever. So let me give you an example. We're meeting somebody, it's a party or a social situation or whatever, and you're meeting them. Very often, what we do is we think about what we're going to say next in this interaction. And what I'm arguing is, if you want to develop sensitivity, you've got to be much more of a listener and much less of a talker. So so you say, well, tell me about yourself. And then you do what you do. You kind of interview the person,
Right.
and that gives you a baseline on, like where they're coming from
Hmm.
and helping you understand. So paying more attention to the other person, paying attention to the subtle cues, and then checking whether you're accurate. So if you encounter somebody, they seem to be a little distraught, say, I'm picking up some cues here that you're not feeling so well. So tell me about that. And then that helps you develop empathy. And empathy comes from that sensitivity, that ability to kind of read other people's cues. So that's the way you have to approach it. If we talk about being better at expressing yourself, so some people have difficulty expressing
Hmm.
themselves, being articulate, as we say. There's a lot of things you can do. There are speaking groups. There's Toastmasters. There's these kinds of groups where you get to publicly speak,
Right.
and you could. And the other thing too is be prepared. So if you're going to a mixer or something like that, be prepared. Have a few things you want to talk about beforehand. So, that works on your expressive skills. And then the other thing too is get some feedback. You want to a lot of guys. So one of the sex differences in this, okay? So women tend to be more sensitive than men, okay? I mean, just as a group, right?
Right.
They're better at picking up on emotions. Men tend to be better at controlling their emotions,
Oh
right?
yeah.
We're
Oh
And
yeah.
if you think about it, that's the way we're raised, right?
Yeah.
Stop crying, son, take it like a man, that kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
what we over time, many of us, not everybody, but men generally, to control our emotions, to control our emotional expressions. So one of the things you have to do is sort of stop that and start to, express your emotions a little bit. And getting feedback really helps. So, we hear this all the time, that your significant other says, you're kind of cold, you're kind of distant or whatever. So work on trying to, put the feelings out there, this idea of kind of like they say, wear your heart on your sleeve, uh, uh, you know, try to make an effort to do this. And if you can't do it non-verbally, you can just verbally do it and say, gosh, I'm not feeling so good today, and I'm down because of this. And overcoming that resistance to get letting your feelings out there, because the only way you're going to connect with people is through feelings, is through feeling like, hey, we understand each other at an emotional level.
So, I mean, it really is about I mean, I always like to make it simple because I'm a simple fella, but it's really about intention, right? It's like
Right.
identification and intention. I have a problem in social situations. And so what I think a lot of men that are going through divorce deal with is their social life has been torpedoed, blown up, Hiroshima, whatever the fuck you want to say. And so they don't know what to do. And because they're left to their own devices, they have to go out. They don't have to, but I mean, yeah, in a way, you have to go out by yourself. Like, I mean, obviously, you can be around friends and stuff, but like, for a lot of guys, what happens is, like I said, things get blown up, and friends choose sides, and suddenly they don't have as many options, or they don't have that comfort level of having that person with them, and so they just kind of feel lost and don't know what to do. Certainly in a social setting, maybe in general, but certainly now that's just them. And so you have to be set the intention, right? Like I need to, or maybe needs not the right word, but I certainly want to get out and be around people. I can't stay in my house, my apartment, or my whatever for ever, right? I have to get out. And so, but it makes me very uncomfortable. I feel very awkward. It's very weird. It's just me. People are going to think I'm weird, but if your intention is to heal, I think from this, part of it, I think, has to be to get out into social settings and be around folks. And so if knowing that, then you have to set the intention and work on it and do these types of things, right? I mean, it's not going to magically happen.
No, you have to go out and practice. It's like the gym membership. If you never go to the gym, you're not gonna build yourself up. And so you've got to go to the gym. And the gym now is a social situation, and get yourself out there. And you can start slow. You don't have, you can start off at find some group that you can identify with that's relatively non-threatening. I one of my colleagues here, she's always posting on Facebook that she has a book club, and that's kind of a women's thing, or it seems like there's more women doing that.
Yeah.
But there's, nothing wrong with having kind of, joining a
Yeah.
discussion group or something like that, and that allows you that practice, right, to practice things. The the other thing too is start off slow and work on the sensitivity, work on the listening skills. Don't
Mm.
feel like you necessarily have to participate, and you can be straight with people. You can say, hey, I'm going through a divorce. I don't feel really safe sharing a lot of myself, but I'm here, and I really want to learn from you all, and I want to, experience it. And so I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm going to really listen. I want to try work on being a better listener. And you can be straight with people. And I think that's the thing too. We're so concerned about our self-image a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Oh yeah.
And I think you got to have a little courage and say, look, people are going to judge you. You can't do anything about that. But, you know, they it's not always going to be negative. I think people think, worst case scenario. And I think what happens, one of the things we find when we do, these programs where we try to develop people's social skills, we find that over time, as they start to develop this, they get a sense of what we call self-efficacy, the belief that they can do it, that they can perform in a social situation. And it's that confidence that really helps them. And so you start to build up a confidence. And so you got to start off slow. But a good way is to start off with the listening skills, the sensitivity skills, and then work on the expressive skills. And you can do those in different scenarios. Like I said, you could join a
Sure.
speaking group like Toastmasters. They say the number one fear of college students is public speaking,
Yeah.
which I find extraordinary because I'm at a college where we make the students present
Yeah.
all the time. And you see it, they're way more confident. And I was in the state university. I'm in a small college, and we see these kids, they are forced to do it because they're in small classes. But when I was in the state university, 150 people in a class, they're afraid to raise their hand and speak up because they're afraid they're going to embarrass themselves. But you know what? 149 other people there. No one's going to remember what you said.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is you have to get the mindset of feeling a sense of confidence, a sense of security that, people are going to judge me, but not going to be the end of the world. And
Right.
probably they're going to be more positive than they are negative.
Is it a matter of also perhaps like having, like I think you mentioned earlier, like scripts, like having something like, I'm going to talk about this and focus on that sort of storytelling, or I guess storytelling is kind of the right way, right? You're kind of essentially telling a story. If you meet someone and they start asking questions, you have a story to tell, certainly. So it is a matter of, would you recommend like somebody like writing out some things, or what, how to
Yeah. Yeah, I think you would want to have a little bit, prepared beforehand. Now, there's a guy that was actually a good friend and colleague, and unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. But his name is Bernie Carducci, and he was an expert in shyness.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he did is he developed. You can actually, I still think, pick these up on Amazon. He developed pocket guides,
Hmm.
like Pocket Guide to Small Talk, and it's just a few tips. And you can probably find these things too. You can probably Google and find. But that's a good strategy. Have something prepared that you want to talk about. And then the other side of it too is that sort of that idea of knowing what to do. So, you want to assess your little pocket guide and say, okay, am I getting too personal here, or is it
Mm.
just right? You want to sort of assess the level of what you're doing. Am I disclosing too much too quickly? That kind of thing. Because it is that is a common situation. I mean, but basically we develop relationships through showing more of ourselves, showing more of our sort of authentic selves to people. But you can't just blurt it all out, right?
Right.
So, so when I talk about impression management, I talk about this delicate balance between controlling your impressions so that you make a socially acceptable presentation and being authentic, showing your true self, but not being like, just laying it all out there. So
Right.
you know, it's a it's a little bit like fly fishing. You want to just give them enough, sort
Yeah.
of out there, but don't throw the whole thing out.
Yeah. It really is a skill, right? You really have to
It's,
practice. Well, I mean,
yeah,
I mean, for some people it comes natural. I mean, I feel like in general, socially, I'm fairly decent. I don't mind public speaking as long as I know what the topic is. If, someone were to throw me in a room full of people and say, talk about the solar system, I'd be like, there's
yeah.
like planets and
So
stuff.
that's the deal. Be prepared.
Yeah.
But look. I mean, if that was the situation, you can turn that around. And they said, well, we're talking about the solar system here,
Right.
and
Right.
you say, yeah, and then you think of a bridge, and you say, well, I was here to talk about movies, but hey, maybe I can bridge that. Have you seen any movies that relate to, you know, did you guys see what's that? The Martian, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, try to make that connection so that you can bridge into the conversation.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so we're gonna dive into something, and how do you? I mean, you mentioned leadership. You mentioned sort of social intelligence and emotional intelligence. I would guess, and I speak from some really recent experience that conflict resolution is a huge part of leadership. Correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I am fucking really bad at it. Help me. My conflict resolution skills are I shut down and I go away, right? And my biggest issue is I can't have difficult conversations because I'm so afraid of words hurting me, because words do hurt. They hurt me. I'm a very
Yeah.
sensitive dude. I know I'm 6'2", bald, and tattoos, but I'm a sensitive fella.
Yeah.
And words hurt. And so I avoid words. I assume, and I know this is some inner child stuff outside of your realm, but I assume that a lot of it is I'm that little fella, he can't take those words. He can't take that hurt. And so he tries to avoid it. I try to avoid it. And I don't know how to get past that. I don't know how to. I just assume everyone's eventually going to go like, well, yeah, well, you're a fucking idiot and your podcast sucks and you're a moron and you deserve to be divorced. And so I don't want to have conversations. I just want to walk away from it. And I know that that's not the right way to do it. I know that hurts people's feelings. I know that probably led to my divorce. And I'm at least, if nothing, I'm at least conscious and aware of it. But how do I get past that piece where I am just so afraid to even have a conversation? And these are not with, like, if you and I had a disagreement, we could have a disagreement. I've had disagreements on this podcast. Not many of them I don't like to. See my earlier comments. But especially someone that is like close to me or I know fairly well. How do I get past having those difficult conversations? Like, how do you practice that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing when it comes to conflict is avoidance is easy, right? I mean, we just avoid the conflict, but we know that's never going to resolve. It's never going to lead to a resolution, right?
No.
So, so the question is, so first, I mean, I think about courage, right? You've got to be courageous and you've got to go out there, and I get it, right? I mean, it's one thing to go out there physically and say, well, he's going to punch me in the face, but I can take it, right?
Right.
But now you're saying, well, emotionally, the emotional punch I can't take because I have a sensitivity there. So first, I think you have to build up the courage to say, I'm going to take an emotional hit, but I'm not going to let it, get to me. And I think a lot of that is to think of the worst case scenario kind of approach. I mean, a lot of psychologists talk about this. What's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing, well, your feelings get hurt, but and then play it all out and say, well, what is that going to mean? Okay, well, I'm going to hurt for a little while. I might have some resentment, but maybe I can get over the resentment. And so you have to kind of do that sort of worst case scenario. And what you'll find often is that if you picture a worst case scenario, what you're actually going to experience is far, far less than a worst case scenario. Rather than a major hurt, it's going to be a very minor hurt in the scheme of things. So you have to kind of do that. But I also think that one of the things that I'm kind of gotten into the last few years in the leadership realm is this idea of, I want to develop your character. And part of your character is having the courage to go into these kind of situations, these emotional situations, and do what needs to be done, and take the hits, the emotional hits, but realize at the other end you're going to come out stronger for it, and build up that courage, that resiliency, that sort of emotional resiliency. And again, it's not easy, but I
No,
really, you need to do it. You need, because avoidance isn't going to help. And so you
no.
need to do something. But the other thing too is, you know, a big part of this is perspective taking when it comes to conflict resolution. Getting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking about how they think about things. And so that's the social level. What are they thinking? Well, they're thinking they want to win and they want to get this outcome or whatever.
Mm.
But then also put yourself in their emotional shoes and think about, what are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And if they're experiencing this, if they're experiencing threat, for example, I'm threatening to them, how can I be less threatened? Right? So turn it around and say, okay, if I'm going to meet this person and understand this person, how can I get inside their heart, their emotions, and realize what's making them tick at an emotional level? And then how can I diffuse that? How can I work on that? Right? And it's hard. I mean,
I
but
think
if
I
you understand the other person, you can do that.
I think I get wrapped up in my own shit so much that I don't take the time sometimes to think about that. Like I don't consider other people's feelings because I'm so wrapped up in my own because I'm so sensitive and I'm so easy to hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's what I talked about. That key to listening to the other person is we get so prepared when we're in an interaction. We don't listen to the other person because we're thinking about what we're going to say next, right? And you got to just put that on hold, and you got to say, okay, so think of it like, you're the therapist or you're the counselor. Tell me, tell me more, tell me more.
right.
Until
Well,
you get enough that you understand it, because you can always share your side later, you know so spend the time. And the other thing too is, it really works. So, we did this stuff with college students years ago. Um, and what we did was we worked with the guys on listening to other people, getting in touch with their partner's feelings, the girl, this is boyfriends and girlfriends in college. And the feedback we got after a while is, the more I listened and the more I was attentive to their emotional cues, I got positive feedback. My girlfriend said, gosh, you've become so warm. You kind of understand me. You get me, you stop being emotionally cold and distant. And then that was reinforcing to them. And then they did it more. And so they got bigger gains, partly because they were getting rewarded from their partner. So that's when it's working, when your partner says, hey, you've changed in a good way. Now this is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight or whatever. But
in terms of like we're talking leadership, and I felt like recently being in a leadership position and being vulnerable, I felt like that was a misstep and a mistake. Like in terms of like I've coached men. I was coaching men to get through this shit show that is divorce. And so that's sort of a therapist. Like I wish I would have I wish I would have went to therapy school and got my psychology degree and all that stuff. But I didn't, and I had whatever. So it's sort of like that sort of dynamic. And sort of, and I'm guessing sort of like in a professor role too, like how vulnerable can you be in those roles and still expect a certain level of
yeah, prestige or
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right,
Because
right.
if especially a therapist, I would say more, or a professor where it's like you're like, guys, I don't know, this problem is really tough or whatever. That's subject you're teaching and you're struggling with it. Like, how much do you? So, I, I went through a program with a coach, and I developed my own. But the program I went through, the guy was very much above the fray. He would lead meetings weekly, but he wouldn't dive into the daily nitty gritty. And I always felt like, well, I didn't want to do it like that. I dove in, and I started sharing all of my fuck ups and stuff. And I felt like, does that affect? It must affect perception. And I think maybe my expectation. Boy, I'm really getting into it here. My
Yeah.
expectation was I would have gotten the same level of support, and maybe it was given, I just didn't see it, but I didn't feel like it. And then maybe I became resentful. I'm sort of getting off track a little bit here, but like, I guess go back to my original question, which is how vulnerable can you be in a leadership position and expect to be seen as a leader?
Well, I think that again, it's that delicate balance, right? You have to maintain your authority or whatever you want to call it. Um, but but you can show vulnerability, and there's lots of research that supports this, we want to see our leaders as human, as caring about us, right? And this goes back to the old thing they used to say about George W. He doesn't look much like a leader, but he's the kind of guy you want to sit down and have a beer with, right? Remember
Right,
that
right. Yeah, sure.
and so we want both of those things. We want our leader to be the strong, person we can count on in a difficult situation, but we also want them to be personable.
Mm,
And gosh, I face this as a faculty member. I'm supposed to be sort of positive role model. I can't
sure.
I can't get down and dirty or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
or get too close. You got to maintain that distance. But what I try to do, and is maintain that air of authority in kind of the classroom setting, but then encourage the students to come one on one.
Mm,
And there I can share things a little bit better when it's in a one on one situation. So, and sometimes you can be straight with people too, because gosh, I remember one time. So when students go up to defend their dissertation, right? So this is they're going to become a doctor or whatever. Where you have a panel of faculty members, and I remember this woman student going, "God, I walked into the room and I thought you guys are going to eat me alive, because I looked and you all look so serious and all that." And I said, "You know what? That's our game face. It's a test, and so we have to have the game face." But think, but we're not in our hearts. We're not that way. We want you to pass. We want you to get done. And but don't just look at the surface. And so I think that's one of the things you want to say to people. And if you're in a leadership role or you're in I'm doing this because of these reasons. I need to look professional. I need to maintain some distance. If you're coaching, I need to maintain that distance, understand that. But I do feel for you. I do. I talk about different kinds of empathy. There's a really good a series of studies that there's sort of really three types of empathy. Okay. The first is perspective taking, and that's purely cognitive. I get it. You're going through a divorce. You're going to have negative, feelings. You're going to feel hurt and all that. But I get it at an intellectual level. Okay. That's just perspective taking. And it's important. Okay. Second is what's called empathic concern. Now I get it. I could put myself in your shoes and I could feel what you're feeling, but I'm not feeling it right now. And that's what a therapist does. They say, okay, I can get the way, the distress you're feeling, but I'm not feeling distress. The third is what leads to emotional contagion. I literally feel your pain. And
mm,
a good therapist doesn't want to have that because they have to have that separation. But a good friend might have that and say, God, I went through it too. But then they've got to move it away from that if they're going to be effective in counseling you back to the empathic concern. They've got to put their own feelings on hold because what happens is, think about it. If you go to a friend who's gone through the same negative experience and you both start crying together, there's not going to be any healing, right? You're going to wallow in your misery, right? And so you have to get to that second level of, I understand it, but to help you through it, I can't feel your pain, but I can understand it. And I'm going to help you deal with that pain. So
Hmm.
you always want to stay in that level, right?
Yeah, I suppose maybe I utilized the group in a way that I shouldn't have, and all I can do is learn and try and fix it, and or be better going forward. But definitely the one thing, and I'll sort of go back to this a little bit, is just this sort of my sensitivity. Like, how do I get a thicker skin? Like, because I feel like I'm incredibly sensitive, and like I like that part of me in general, but sometimes it is not a strength.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it is a
Well,
weakness.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think work on that in terms of, why am I taking things so personally? Why am I letting it get to me? And yeah, you do have to build up a little bit of a tougher skin, you
How do you
know?
do that though? Like, people say that, but how do you do it? Like, I'm a man, and I think we're all like this. Like, you tell me the steps to take, the instruction manual. I will actually read this one and I'll try it. Like, what are the specifically? And I'm not gonna call you up in 6 months and
Yeah.
be
Well,
like,
I think,
dude,
okay.
I tried these
Yeah.
and they
Well,
didn't
Michael,
work.
look, yeah, Michael, I mean, I think in this case that's where you need to like talk to a therapist, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you need to
yeah,
say, I've got this and I know you were well, anyway. I mean, I think, it's okay to reach out for professional assistance.
yeah.
And
I mean, I have a therapist, but we haven't dove into this yet. It hasn't come up, right? Because I say this all the time. I was telling my buddy Chris this yesterday. It's like, if there was like a computer simulation program, like a thing I could virtual reality, and people would pop up in my life and randomly insult me, and then I would be able to figure out how to navigate that shit. But that doesn't exist, and so these moments don't happen every day, right? And how I just
yeah.
don't know how you practice something that's not seemingly not practicable.
Well, I think a good therapist would help you with that. A good therapist would say, you know, okay, imagine this scenario,
Mm.
and this person says this hurtful thing to you, and you go, yeah, that would really hurt. Why would it hurt? And then they would work through that with you and try to help you develop that
I
that
think
sort
that's
of
what we're doing now.
yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I
thank
mean,
you.
and the reality is, what's the worst case scenario?
I don't know,
You
man.
make a total fool of yourself. Hey, I'm as personally, I'm as self-conscious as
Sure.
anyone else. Um, but you have to develop this ability to say, what's the worst thing that happens? So I embarrass myself, okay? But I'm not going to die.
Right.
I'm not gonna be shut out of, and maybe really offended or led to some kind of breakdown in a relationship, in a friendship or something like that. Is it going to kill the friendship? And you can always go to the person and say, look, I did this. I think I wrecked our friendship. And can you assure me that, or can we talk about that? And you'll find out it wasn't that big of a deal. Person got upset, they thought about it, they're not going to, it's not the end of the relationship necessarily. And if it is, then you want to say, well, you want to defend yourself and say, was that relationship worth saving? If the person went off because I made one mistake, and hey, it's because of my own vulnerability, and if they can't handle my own vulnerability, then why the heck do I want to be associated with?
Yeah, I think I made some major
I know it's
missteps.
hard. That's the thing. It's very hard to develop this. I do a lot around leader development, and it takes a lot of work to become a good leader. And in fact, the last book I wrote I did that during COVID, and it's called Daily Leadership Development. And it's, what can you do just every day? It's like, the idea is to put it on your nightstand, read a page a day, and say, okay, because at the end it tells you, what can I do today to hone this leadership skill, or to gain this piece of knowledge, or whatever. And the idea is, got to do it every day. So
Yeah, I always kind of fell into leadership roles because I'm just going to be honest. I'm tall and white. It
yeah.
just
Hey, A lot of people become leaders because other people look to them and say, "Hey, step up. You look, you're tall."
I mean,
Yeah,
I think, I mean, if you, I know the average height for CEOs in America is 6'2". I'm 6'2". I mean, I'm not saying that makes me a CEO. I'm just saying I think that that's a component, and I've always felt like, when I was military, when I went through boot camp, I was sergeant, master at arms. Sorry, Navy fellas, master at arms. Like that was a leadership position that I was sort of thrust into. And so it always sort of falls on my lap, and sometimes absolutely positively because of my choices. Like I decided I was going to help people through divorce, and I made that decision. And but I hate fucking up. I hate messing up. I hate this is turning into a therapy session clearly, but I
No,
I I
I think a lot of that is going through this process of learning that, it isn't that bad. People make mistakes. We're human. And you need to, develop that resilience to say, messed up. I'm going to try to do better next time. I'm going to probably mess up again, but I'll always try to improve and look at it as, the sort of baby steps idea, step by step.
yeah.
I'm getting better every day, but and realize too, it's not this way. It's not
Oh yeah.
upward trend. There are times, and this we know this from leadership development. My colleague, who's a real expert in leadership development, says if you track a leader's development, there are times where they just drop down to the bottom, again, but then they have to work their way back up. That it's not a straight upward path. It's peaks and valleys, right? Peaks and valleys.
Well, I'm certainly in a valley for sure.
Well, then what I would say is work your way out of that. Figure out, say, I'm not going to stay down here in this valley. How
Yeah,
am I
no,
going
if I'm not, if there's a lot of things I am, and I like a lot of parts of me, and I am a resilient person for sure. I don't intend on not learning from this experience. And to be quite frank, I haven't learned enough from my divorce yet, because this is one of the central reasons is I was unable to have difficult conversations because I'm fucking sensitive and I don't want to get my feelings hurt, so I just avoid, and I need to fucking stop it. And I feel like I've made a lot of strides in understanding myself, and I thought just doing stuff like this, like being vulnerable and being open and saying these things, and not just this topic but many others that surround this divorce stuff. I thought that was enough. It or maybe I'd hoped it was enough. I don't know. I felt like if I could just be open and honest, that would be enough to sort of be a leader and to also heal, because I'm talking, but I haven't done enough of making fundamental changes of my personality. And I just, and I hear you in terms of, I gotta sort of, I don't know, get over is such a, I don't like the phrase, but like I need to get beyond this fear of being hurt by people's words.
yeah,
Because it's not embarrassment, or, I mean, I've said so many dumb fucking things in this podcast. This is going to be episode 120. If anybody wanted to take the time and comb through, I said some really dumb shit. I'm sure of it. So I don't care about that. But it's
yeah,
that piece. Like I've had people, like, people that reach out negatively and, like, say really negative shit. That doesn't bother as much because I don't know them. It's the people that are in my life that are able to just, those words are like a shiv in a.
yeah. Okay, let me give you an analogy. Okay, there are these guys that they work on to develop their six pack, right? Their stomach muscles, and they want to show you how strong their stomach muscles are. So punch me,
Right.
punch me in the gut, right?
Right.
Okay. What you're doing is you're doing the emotional equivalent of that. You're saying, "Hey, punch me in the gut."
Right.
Okay, but you haven't developed the muscles to deal with it, and so you're asking people to punch you in the gut before you've developed your six pack to protect yourself, right?
Holy
And
shit.
so that's really what you need to do. You need to work on developing that thicker emotional skin and learning how, and the only way you're going to do that is through cognitively reframing it and saying, I what's the worst, what's the worst thing's going to happen, and get over that, the hurt, make the hurt less, because the guy getting punched in the gut, it probably still hurts,
Right.
but it doesn't do any damage, and because he's got the resilience. And so it's always going to hurt a little bit, but
Sure.
it hurts less as you get stronger.
Boy, I
So
think you just called me out in the nicest way ever. Because you're right. You're right. You're right. I want to be somewhere, and I sort of maybe, I don't know if pretend's the right word. That's awfully harsh, but maybe it
yeah.
is.
So I'll tell you something that Bernie Carducci, the shyness guy, taught me. He said, there's really two kinds of shy people. There's people who are sort of just really shy in a traditional sense, and there are the people who are over analyzing things. They're overly sensitive. They don't put themselves out there because they're afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah.
But if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to make any progress, right? And so that's the deal. And what they become is the social wallflower. Think of them at the big dance, right? And they're there and they're standing back watching, and they're picking out all kinds of things because they're so sensitive. And they're going, oh, that guy's going to hit on that girl. And boy, I'd sure like to go up and ask that girl to dance, but I fear the rejection. And it's that oversensitivity that's keeping you from engaging and going up and asking them. And the worst case scenario, they say, no, get out of here, you
Yeah.
creep. I don't think people are going to go that far. But even if they did, what would be the deal? Well, that says something about how do you develop the resistance, the resilience. If they called you a creep, that says something about them. That doesn't say anything about you, because all you did was appropriately ask them if they wanted to dance, right? So you shouldn't feel, if somebody oversteps on their side, that's about them. That's not about you. And you got to develop that kind of thinking. Right?
Yeah, and I do think that I wasn't the only one that made mistakes, or I mean I certainly was the leader and I handled it all very poorly, but there were absolutely missteps throughout. But as the leader, I there's some things that I should have sort of nipped in the bud, or
Hey,
done differently.
there's a truism about leader development. Leaders learn much more from their mistakes than they do from their
Yeah,
successes.
yeah,
We
yeah.
look, we do a post-mortem, we do a after review when we fail. We
Yeah.
rarely do an after review when we succeed, because when we succeed, we just think, oh, that's normal, right? So the reality is, you learn a lot more from your mistakes, but you can also learn from your successes. So do a postmortem for a success and say, hey, that went really well. Why did it go well? Well, because I said this or I did that. And so that's the other thing, is really do these after action reviews and say, how can I learn from this?
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, that's definitely what I'm trying to do now. I mean, this is very recent, and so it's all sort of very.
Yeah.
I'm not a religious fellow, but man, sometimes things happen, and you go, boy, that seems to line up. Like literally days ago, and here you are being able to address some of these things with me and for me, and so thank you. I know that this definitely turned into a therapy session, but those to me are the good ones. That's why people listen. I believe it's because there is someone that can relate to what I'm saying 100,000%, and they're going to get something from this interview, therapy session, that will help them for sure.
Well, so let me because you listeners might want some resources and things.
Sure.
So, and I think you found me through psychology today, right?
Yeah,
So,
I was thinking earlier on I walked for lunch and I walked back, and I was thinking if psychologytoday.com does ads, they really ought to contact me, because I found I nearly all of my guests come from psychologytoday.com. But anyway, yes, that's where I found you.
yeah. So what I'm at the stage of my career where I'm trying to, like, I call it giving away the psychology, right? Trying to, and so that's why I blog, I do that. I don't do this because it, for the money or the
Sure.
fame or whatever. I mean, I do it because have a knowledge base. I'm trying to give it away. The last book I talked about, the daily leadership development book, I self-published it purposely because I wanted to keep the cost low. I wanted it to be out there for people. It's if you want to get the ebook, which you can't put the ebook on your nightstand, but I guess you could
Right.
put it into your phone and read it.
Sure.
I kept it at $9.99, which is as low as they'll go to, anyway, on Amazon. So
Gotcha.
And the idea is I'm trying to get this, what I've learned through this whole career out to people to try to help them, because
Sure.
we know enough about what works and what doesn't work, right? And so that's the point. And so if people are, turn to a trusted source. I mean, I think, psychology today, there's some pop stuff in there and all that, but I think pretty much they've been monitoring things, and you can find these useful sites that can help you. And so definitely, it's like anything. It's like, I'm a college professor. I tell the students, you don't read the textbook, you don't prepare beforehand, you don't come with the right mindset of learning, you're never going to learn anything. You can get through, you can get C's, but you won't know anything when you get out. You have a sheet of paper that says you got a college degree, but you don't have any knowledge.
Yeah.
So you got to work at it.
Is there a book? I mean, besides the one you just mentioned that you wrote, is there another book that was really helpful in your journey, or that people have recommended for sort of having difficult conversations, conflict resolution, that kind of stuff? Is there anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think there's not a single book comes to mind, but I would say go and look at these. Read reviews of some of the
Mm.
books that'll help you. I'm more in kind of the leadership area,
Sure.
and so I think about books that help develop leadership. Which is probably not for your audience, but go out and investigate and
Yeah.
and do some of that, and read a little bit, and you don't it
Oh yeah.
doesn't have to be a book. That's why I bring up the Psych Today.
Mm.
They typically are 2 to 5 minute reads. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's not a big investment of
Oh
time.
yeah, no, I love that website. It's a wealth of knowledge, and it's provided me with many folks that I've interviewed. So, as you know, the last question that I ask everybody, and we'll get to where people can find you and your books and stuff. But the last question I ask everybody is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
Yeah. So first, take care of yourself, and take care of yourself physically, right? Do the right things. Don't overeat. Don't overdrink. Don't um, physical well-being, but also mental well-being. Get and again, using the exercise analogy, it's going to take some work. You're going to have to work out. You're going to have to work at it, both the physical and the mental. Second, seek out support. Okay. You don't have to do this alone, whether that's professional counseling. And I think there's nothing better than professional counseling, because these people are trained. Realize, though, you may have to shop around to find somebody who's going to really help you. Or if you a trusted friend, a trusted colleague, reach out to people. And then the last thing is that motivation. Get motivated. Don't sit on your butt. Don't, get motivated to make yourself better, to work at it. Realize it's going to be hard work. It's going to take some actual physical work, like going out and joining a speaking group or whatever,
Sure.
or getting yourself out there into a social situation so that you can try things out. But also maintain that motivation in your heart to keep getting better.
Yeah. Dr. Ron, thank you so very much for doing this. Where can people reach you, find you, your books, and anything that you do
Yeah,
besides
well,
Psychology Today?
yeah, Psychology Today, my blog, it's called Cutting Edge Leadership, but I talk about all this stuff. I don't just stick with leadership. So
Yep.
I've got a lot of personal stuff. Actually, my stuff on nonverbal communication gets the most hits and everything. So
Hmm.
so I've often talking about that. So that's one way. If they're interested, I have a website. It's riggioleadership.org, and I occasionally put up some of the blog posts there, and that's also how you can get the daily leadership development book. Most of my rest of my books are pretty academic books, so they'd only be really for an audience that was really seriously interested in the study of leadership. But my daughter helped me with the daily leadership development book. She said, "What's in this, Dad?" I said, "Like everything I know." Like I put, it's not a thin book. I know this is a podcast, but
No, yeah,
it's a
it's a,
tome,
yeah,
right?
it's
But it's in bite-sized chunks,
oh,
so
okay.
it's a page a day essentially.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. I will
So
definitely check it out.
yeah,
All right. Well, thank you again for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
of course.
hopefully we will do this again in the future, and I'll have a little bit. I'll have some growth to talk about. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and feel free to reach out to me and keep me posted how you're doing.
I will. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Yep. You too. Bye. Thank you so much for watching and/or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.